Ever stared at a blank page, wondering where on earth to kick off your story? It's something I think all of us writers go through at some time or another. Starting a story is kind of like choosing the right outfit for a first date. You want to make a great first impression, but not try too hard. And this can seem tricky because, well, let's count the challenges. First, you've got to set the right tone. Then there's everything surrounding introducing your character and their world. Oh, and let's not forget the pressures of making a killer first impression, which, of course, can be difficult figuring out what is the best first impression when there are so many good starting points. I could go on and on, but we all know it. Beginning a story is an art. And like with most things when it comes to art, I believe that the best way to approach it isn't through trying to be unique or interesting or anything like that, but by focusing on craft and allowing creativity to be the byproduct. With that in mind, let's start things with the 3 potential stars of an opening scene, as identified in Hook 'em in 10, the protagonist, the antagonist, or a situation/conflict. Of these 3, the best place to start is typically the protagonist. The reason why is simple. Audiences are in a hurry to label someone as the protagonist. Think of the audience like a baby who imprints on whoever they see first. Furthermore, this protagonist is the most important piece in the puzzle of getting things rolling. While your concept will be whatever hooks the audience, the protagonist is going to be the thing that keeps them in. As I often like to say, character is king. In the first 10 pages or so, where people are deciding if they want to devote any time to your story or not, you generally wish to hook people with your character then. To hook readers into your story, you only need to do 3 things. Make the audience believe in the reality of the hero, care about the hero's circumstances, and invest their hopes in the hero to solve the hero's problem. We'll address BCI, believe, care, and invest, in greater detail at the end of this video. What I'm more concerned about exploring from here on are the other 2 routes you can take. The key to deciding if you want to go those routes depends on the genre, which brings us to the concept of genre anchors. Genre anchor is a term I created that's inspired by the rule of 10 from the world of screenplays. The rule of 10 states that the first 10 pages of a screenplay should contain a genre-pertinent event that hooks audience interest and inspires confidence in you as a writer. Genre anchors as a concept is me taking that, adding clarity with the branding, and streamlining it to my understanding of craft. Here's my formal definition. A genre anchor is the specific element or event at the beginning of a story that firmly establishes the story's genre. It sets the tone, style, and thematic expectations for the audience, ensuring they immediately understand the type of story that they are about to experience. This could be a character, setting, action, or a dialogue piece that distinctively signifies the genre. Furthermore, by focusing on delivering genre expectations out of the gate, you can scratch the audience's immediate itch for whatever experience that they're there for immediately, which will help them focus on whatever follows the opening instead of feeling restless. That previous sentence is what I consider the key to deciding if you wish to start with a character who isn't the protagonist. So, in the case of an antagonist, it's best to start with when you wish to create immediate conflict and tension, or you wish to set a tone that contrasts with where the protagonist starts the story. A good example of this is Disney's animated version of Mulan. Mulan's story starts off with slice of life stuff, with Mulan preparing to meet a matchmaker, and her doing her chores in a way that makes for an amazing character establishing moment to her being resourceful. While this moment is great for foreshadowing her use of brains to tackle problems, take notes, stupid live action remake, it doesn't set the proper tone, and thus could lead to restlessness. Thus, starting with Shan Yu's Invasion of China is the best opening spot. It fulfills the genre expectations of action adventure stories, thus anchoring the story's genre, and it becomes the ticking clock in the background throughout Mulan's more mundane stuff. Or, for someone who wants an anime example, Dragon Ball Z opens with Raditz's arrival to Earth and him killing a former. This sets a better tone for the story than starting with Goku reuniting with all his friends. Basically, you're often going to consider this approach in stories where the villain acts and the hero reacts. Again, I say if you can satisfy the genre goods and introduce the protagonist at the same time, it's often better to go that route. Everything about delivering on genre goods being key is doubly true when opening with a situation. In fact, I can think of only 3 reasons why you would want to do this, while keeping in mind genre anchoring. 1. You wish to set up the world or environment. 2. There's an inciting incident that must be seen, such as a mystery or a disaster. 3. You're doing something with non-linear storytelling. I've noticed Brandon Sanderson often likes to use this first variant in situations opening in prologues. For instance, Mistborn starts on a slave plantation and focuses on the situation with the Ska, with an emphasis placed on one of the victims. The situation changes when Kelsier, one of the protagonists, murders the slave owner and forces them to rebel. For those who want to think magic systems and fantasy-wise, this is where you can work in a character who is more experienced or actively working on something in the moment with the aspects of whatever the situation that is relevant to the protagonist and the main plotline. I personally think a mentor character prior to being the hero is great for this role, but that's just me. Anyway, if you want the central conflict at the start immediately, you can use this to introduce a victim in whatever situation is going on that'll connect to the protagonist eventually. I always like to cite my biggest influence, Leverage, as an example of this, as the story often begins with the client of the week suffering from whatever harm has befallen them. The villain will sometimes be featured as well, but many times the emphasis is just placed on the victim. Really, opening with a victim POV makes for a great situation-based opening. As for a non-linear example, we're going to use cases with things like framing devices. I'm in a bit of a Disney animation mood this week, so let's look at Disney's Aladdin, which starts the story with the peddler. The peddler helps set everything up in a whimsical, lighthearted, and magical way. Given the type of story being told, this works well here to lay the foundation for everything. Had the story started with Jafar, as the next scene shows, the tone might have come across as too dark, which wouldn't be ideal given how prevalent the story is as a comedy and a romance. Thus, Jafar's opening isn't ideal for capturing the story's full tone. As for Aladdin, he's far from ideal given the circumstances he lives in. You risk making things a bit more somber or serious than you might want, despite the more comedic violence. Plus, it doesn't capture the film's magical elements for quite some time. It could give the audience the false impression that the story is more grounded purely in Aladdin's hardships, rather than the enchanting world of Agrabah and its fantastical elements. Thus, the merchant is the character who sets the tone best for the circumstances. Regardless, I don't often recommend starting with a situation. It can be done, but it's the easiest to screw up and risky even if it's done well. Especially if something is messing with non-linear storytelling, as weird structures demand a greater understanding of craft to pull off. I say this speaking from experience with my first novel's opening chapter. I had a lot of people bond with the character of Gerard Turner, despite his existence being a small one in the grand scheme. That was a risk I took. The trade-off was that I tried to deliver on the genre goods in a way neither Cassidy nor the antagonist could. Cassidy is too much of a romantic character to open with, plus she knew far too much as the actual narrator, while the antagonists are mystery characters, so I couldn't give too much out of the gate. Hence, my decision. Still, it's something I'd rather not repeat given its drawbacks, which is why Book 2 opens with Cassidy pulling a bank heist, protagonist POV, and genre anger. If you do choose to go with the situation route, I recommend keeping it as concise as possible. Like how One Piece, despite opening with Gold Roger's execution, is only within the first page before time cutting up to Luffy as a child. From then on, we stick with him, and Oda does what he can to make us believe, care, and invest in him quickly. If you want to know more about what I have to say about BCI, click this video about Spy Family. In it, I go over BCI in greater detail.